The world's largest wildlife conference is taking place in Manila this week. Its goal, raise awareness of migratory animals and their critical role in our ecosystem, not just as food, but as pollinators, pest control, and more. However, natural and man-made factors are threatening our wildlife. Joining us to talk about these challenges and efforts to protect our biodiversity, we have in our Rockwell studio Dr. Bradnee Chambers, Executive Secretary of the Convention on the Conservation of Migratory Species of Wild Animals. We'll shorten that to CMS. And Dr. Theresa Mundita, the Director of Protected Areas and Wildlife Bureau of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. Good morning to both of you.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So let's start with you, Bradnee. Actually, let's start with Theresa first. You know, this is a massive convention, the first time in Asia,
Yes.
and the Philippines is hosting it. How important and significant is it for us to host this?
It's really important. We need more membership in Asia, and having it in the Philippines means we can expose the non-members to all the good things we're doing in the convention for these species. And we can showcase it here in Manila, so it's extremely important that we're here.
Yes, it's also very relevant for us, being a major migratory pathway for a lot of migratory birds. We have 20,000 to 40,000 migratory birds that pass through the country, and also we have 5 species of marine turtles that go through our waters, and dolphins and whales as well. And we want more people in the Philippines to recognize this importance and to link it with their daily lives. And I think hosting the convention allows us to raise the profile of the species, the migratory species, and the other wildlife in the country.
Yeah, there's the profile for sure, because they're critical now, I feel, to ecotourism. Theresa, just staying with you, you mentioned the birds, you mentioned sea turtles. What I've been seeing too is the whale sharks, the buntading that a lot of people talk about. A lot of my friends talk about swimming with the whale sharks. That's become such a huge draw for the Philippines. But at the same time, there's been criticism on how tour operators are handling this influx of tourism and how the animals are being treated.
Yes, that's right, Annalisa. One of our proposals is the uplisting of the whale shark from Appendix 2 to Appendix 1, giving it more importance for the protection of that specific species. And we also have a proposal on sustainable tourism, which actually highlights what you just mentioned, to make sure that our tourism activities will not largely impact the species that are the main attraction of our tourism industry. So that's those are important proposals that we have put forward, and we hope that at the end of the conference we'll be able to get a lot of support, especially at the global level.
Yeah, and Bradnee, turning to you, can you give us just kind of a sense of the scope of this convention? So massive, a lot of priorities. Can you name some of the ones that you're really looking to push by the end of this week?
Well, it's a convention that covers species that move between international borders all around the world, from monarch butterflies, very small, up to big blue whales, birds, African lions, elephants. It's really all of these really important animals that move between borders, and the only way to actually protect them, because if you protect them in one country, that's great, but then if they move around, they have to be protected in the other countries. So this is the nature of the convention. Here, it's really important. We're strengthening the convention with a compliance mechanism. We're hoping that's going to go through. We're in really tough negotiations right now. We have some species that are really quite important for ecotourism, such as lion, leopard, giraffe, whale shark, that are being proposed to be protected under the convention. We also are trying to pass resolutions that will try to get countries to create laws. You mentioned the need to have sustainability with ecotourism and make sure that we don't encroach on these animals. So getting countries to pass guidelines and standards and laws to be able to protect these species nationally is really, really important. So that's also part of the agenda this week.
For sure, there are a lot of challenges. One, that's very big in this region is smuggling, poaching, trafficking of a lot of these wildlife, and it has to do at the root, really, of the perception of the value of these animals in terms of medical properties or the status that is associated with them. how do you go about changing a mindset if it's so entrenched in cultural identity? It's the demand, for example, in China for things like pangolin, as well as tigers, things like that. How do you go about that?
Well, one of the ways we do it is to try to make sure that people understand the true value of the species. For example, a manta ray, if you go out and you fish a manta ray, it's maybe worth $100 as a catch. But if you put it in a protected area and you build an ecotourism program around it, it could be worth $200,000 over the span of its lifetime. So we have to make sure that people on the street, that governments know the true value. Plus, we really need to ensure that we have good enforcement, that we enable countries to have the capacity to enforce their rules, to make sure that poachers are prosecuted and that they get serious sentences if they're prosecuted. So yes, there's lots we can do, and we're trying to address this. Awareness raising is really important, but also law enforcement is important too.
And I did want to ask, because the Philippines is the only ASEAN nation that's part of the CMS. So how do you go about encouraging the other countries? Because all of us here in Southeast Asia are very close, and this is where the cross-border smuggling happens. So how do you get those countries on board if they're not even part of this convention?
Well, the Philippines is helping us. They're being here in Manila is raising the profile. The Philippines has actually reached out to all the ASEAN members. They're here. They're telling them about the convention, the need to protect these species. We're making the case on the economic value. We're also making the case that this is now a global convention, that it's not just one or two regions. We have big actors, India, South Africa, Brazil just joined us. So if you really want to be part of the global biodiversity regime, the international laws that we all endeavor to follow globally, then you need to be part of this convention.
Yes, it's Annalisa, it's also very good and very timely that we're also hosting the ASEAN 50, the ASEAN Leaders Summit. So we really want to promote the convention. During this time when we're hosting the ASEAN, there are already certain partners, member countries that have expressed their interest, and we're going to follow through that interest in the coming weeks, months, and years.
And Theresa, I'll stay with you for this one. The pollution is a major issue for sure across the region. What is the Philippines doing on that front to protect wildlife that's affected by things like plastic waste? And, we see pictures of garbage strewn all over the beaches. How do we address that threat to wildlife?
Well, it's a good thing that we started off with the conference with the Leaders' Breakfast, which actually already put together a lot of these leaders to talk about marine pollution, marine debris. And again, it's raising the profile of the impacts of these pollutants to our marine species. And since we share, when we talk about migratory species, they pass through our waters, and all of them are affected by the marine pollution and the marine debris that is that comes from the coastal and from the countries that surround these water areas, and so it is one of the subjects that we will also be discussing in the conference, and because it's a common problem in the ASEAN, we are also raising it in some of our ASEAN fora to be able to address this among all the 10 ASEAN countries.
Yeah, certainly something very important to protecting the animals. Now, Bradnee, another big issue, of course, in this region is overfishing, because most of the fish supplies of the world comes from this region, especially in the South China Sea. We're seeing a potential fisheries collapse there. How can countries really work together on seeing the value of protecting the species there, but still satisfy the demand for food? Because that's what's driving everything. The population here is so huge, they want the food. They need the food.
Yeah, it's so important. First of all, you have to get rid of fishing subsidies. There has to be good data to be able to set quotas for fishermen. For us, what's really important is when they're going out and fishing, that they use technologies that have less impact on our species. So when you're catching fish, you don't by accident catch turtles or sharks or whales or dolphins. And there's a lot of good technologies out there which are cheap, but they just need to be deployed. So there are solutions. We have to get those solutions deployed much more effectively.
Yeah, very big issues you guys are tackling this week. Hopefully you can get some solutions and measures and enforcement passed through, because this is a very important issue for us here in Asia Pacific as well as the world. Thank you so much. Bradnee Chambers there with CMS, as well as Dr. Theresa Mundita Lim with the DENR.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.